Who else has a key to your house? Hannah Bell asked the question before I was fully awake. I was in the guest room next door, still wearing yesterday's jeans, with sunlight cutting across a bed I had never slept in before. A glass of water sat on the nightstand. Beside it sat my brass house key. I stared at it. What? Hannah placed her phone beside the glass. Watch. The security recording had been taken a little after midnight. My backyard filled the screen. The rear gate moved. Then a woman stepped beneath the porch light, reached into her coat, and unlocked my back door. Rebecca, my ex-wife. The woman who had placed every key she owned on my kitchen counter the morning our divorce became final. At least, that was what I had believed. My key was sitting right there between us, which meant Rebecca had another one. My mind immediately began doing what it had done throughout most of my marriage. Maybe she needed something. Maybe I had forgotten giving her permission. Maybe there was still an explanation that made all of this normal. Hannah watched my face. Luke, don't do that. Do what? Make her explanation before she has to. I had nothing to say. On the screen, Rebecca disappeared inside my house. A minute later, she came back out. As she crossed beneath the porch light, her coat shifted. Something pale blue flashed beneath her arm. A folder. I knew that folder. I had locked it away the night before. Hannah, she did not answer. Her fingers closed around the edge of the nightstand. Then she said, "This isn't the first time I've seen Rebecca near your house when you weren't home." The hangover stopped mattering. What do you mean? Hannah looked toward the window instead of at me. And that was when I understood the key was no longer the most frightening thing in the room. Rebecca had another way into my house, but Hannah had been watching her long enough to know it, and she had never told me why. I dressed without saying anything else. Hannah waited in the hall while I tied my shoes. The distance between her front door and mine was less than 20 feet, but that morning it felt longer than the walk home after my divorce. My back door was still locked. No broken latch, no damaged frame, no mark around the deadbolt. I stood on the step with my hand against the brass knob. "You don't have to go in alone," Hannah said. "I'm fine." The words came out automatically. She did not argue. Inside, nothing looked disturbed. My coffee mug was still beside the sink. My jacket hung over the same chair. Rebecca had crossed through this room after midnight, but the house had absorbed her visit without showing it. I went to the office. My father's file box sat beneath the desk, an old steel thing with dark green paint worn silver around the handle. He had kept deeds, insurance papers, tax receipts, and every warranty he ever received inside it. After he died, I kept using it because throwing it away felt too much like throwing away the last object that still expected me to be responsible. I pulled it forward. The small lock was open. Hannah stayed near the doorway. "Was it locked yesterday?" "Yes." "You're sure?" I remembered putting the blue folder inside before the party, turning the tiny key, then testing the lid twice because the lock had always been unreliable. "Yes." I lifted the lid. The folder was gone. Everything else remained. My father's death certificate, the deed to the house, business registration papers, a photograph of my parents. Rebecca had taken one thing and left the rest neat enough that I might not have noticed for days. Hannah shifted her weight.
"I found the file
What
on the
was in it?
divorce."
Something from the divorce.
"Where's the
Her
rest of
face
it?"
tightened. "You know what it was."
I don't know
I know
what
what
you're
I think it
talking
was.
about.
Which is, Luke, I don't want to guess. You didn't mind guessing that Rebecca was watching my house. That wasn't a guess. The answer came too quickly. "How long have you been paying attention to my house?" Hannah looked toward the floorboards. "I pay
I
attention
needed
to a
some
lot of
space.
things." That isn't an
It's
answer.
just a workshop,
No,
that's all.
she said.
I know
It
what
isn't.
it is.
She had lived next
It's
door
just
for
where
almost
I
a
work.
year. She knew when my crew left early on Fridays. She knew Biscuit barked at delivery trucks. She knew I drank my coffee black because cups sometimes appeared on my porch rail before work. Until that morning, I had treated those details as kindness. "Why were you watching Rebecca?"
Where did you get
I
that
wasn't
key?
watching her at first. At first? Hannah exhaled. 3 weeks ago, I was closing my shop late.
I found it.
I saw a car across the street. Rebecca was inside. "You knew it was her?" "I'd seen pictures." "She stayed?" "When I went to bed, the car was there. When I woke up, it was still there. She left 2 minutes after you drove away." My hand tightened
You
around
saw
the
the
edge of the
car.
desk. "And you
You said
said
nothing.
I told myself there could be a reason.
I was-
The words sounded exactly like mine. Maybe she needs something. Maybe there is an explanation. You just told me not to do that. I know, There was no defense in her voice. That made it harder to stay angry and easier to distrust her. My phone buzzed in the kitchen. A message from Marcus, my foreman. You alive? Call me before Monday. Preservation board moved the final review up. I stared at the screen. The restoration contract. Nearly half our winter work depended on it. Rebecca knew that. Years earlier, when our marriage still worked, she had helped organize the company records. Hannah saw my expression. That folder was about the business? I did not answer. Rebecca had spent 3 years insisting the document inside the blue folder had no legal meaning. She had called it irrelevant. She had laughed when my lawyer mentioned it. And sometime after midnight, she had entered my house and taken it. Rebecca's name was still in my contacts. My thumb hovered over it. Call her. Ask. Give her a chance to explain. The old reflex felt almost physical. Luke. I lowered the phone. If you call her now, Hannah said, what are you going to ask? I had no answer that did not sound like permission. She stepped toward the door. Check what's missing first. You mean besides the folder? I mean everything. Huh? Her hands settled on the frame.
Inventory
and change
everything.
the locks before you
Replace the
decide who
locks.
deserves an explanation.
Right.
Then she left. I stood in my kitchen listening to her gate close next door. On the counter, my brass key caught the morning light. For years, I had thought a locked door meant the person outside needed permission to enter. That morning, I learned something uglier. A lock only works when you know who still has a key. By Monday morning, the lock on my back door was new, the blue folder was still gone, and I had managed to tell myself 6 different versions of why none of it had to become a larger problem. That was the skill Rebecca had sharpened in me without either of us naming it. Not forgiveness. Translation. She would do something that hurt, and I would translate it into something easier to live with. She was tired. She was stressed. She had not meant it that way. I had misunderstood. By the time I finished translating, there was usually nothing left for her to apologize for. Marcus was already at the job site when I arrived, standing beneath the front porch of a weathered Queen Anne with a pencil behind one ear. You look terrible, he said. Good morning to you too. That was me being polite. I put my tool bag down and checked the balusters we had stripped the previous week. Work usually settled me. Old wood did not argue about what had happened to it. Rot was rot. A split joint was a split joint. If someone had covered damage with paint, you could scrape until the truth showed. People were harder. Marcus handed me the drawings. The board moved the review to Thursday. Why? Elaine said a committee member is leaving town. He watched me. You want to tell me what's wrong? No. Want to lie better? I almost smiled. Marcus had worked beside me long enough to know when I was carrying something. I crouched beside a porch column and ran my thumb over a crack near the base. We need to sister this before we prime. That bad? The column, or you? The column. Shame. He walked away. I had built Mercer Restoration slowly after my father died. At first it was just me, a borrowed truck, and jobs too small for established contractors to bother with. Rebecca had been there then. That mattered. She designed the first invoices that did not look homemade. She photographed finished work and convinced me to raise prices when I was still charging like I needed permission to earn a living. There had been good years. Remembering that made every later injury feel as if it needed to be weighed against an earlier kindness. Our marriage did not collapse in one dramatic betrayal. Rebecca simply became increasingly certain that my life was something waiting to be improved. A larger shop, a different neighborhood, more employees, more visibility. Whenever I resisted, she called it fear. Sometimes she was right. I could be stubborn. I hid inside routine when decisions scared me. I called caution, patience, even when it was really avoidance. But Rebecca learned something worse. If she told other people what I meant before I spoke, I often let her. At dinners, she answered questions about my business. At the bank, she finished explanations I had started. Once, after I turned down a renovation because the financing looked wrong, she told friends I had panicked. I stood beside her and said nothing. Later, she asked why I was quiet. I told her it was not worth making a scene. She said, "See, that's why I have to explain you." The sentence stayed, because some part of me accepted it. By lunch, my phone had been in my hand 3 times. Rebecca's name stayed on the screen, but I never pressed call. I knew what I wanted to ask. Did you take the folder? Then I knew what would happen. She would ask why I was accusing her. I would explain the camera. She would ask why Hannah had footage. My question would disappear. By the end, I would be defending the fact that I had asked it. So I put the phone face down on the tailgate. A truck slowed at the curb. Hannah's. She parked and lifted a small wooden drawer from the passenger seat. Marcus glanced at me. I ignored him. Hannah climbed the porch steps. I'm bringing this over before you accuse me of theft, too. The joke landed badly. She knew it immediately. Sorry. What is it? The drawer from the Whitmore sideboard. You said you could match the missing runner. I had forgotten. She had asked me about it before the party, before the key, before I knew she had been keeping parts of the truth from me. I took the drawer from her. Our hands did not touch. Her attention moved to the porch column. You found rot under the base? Crack. Worse on the back? I stared at her. The paint is lifting, she said. Most people saw an old porch. Hannah saw the exact place water had started winning. She did the same thing with furniture. She noticed what had been covered. I hated that she had apparently noticed things about my life and chosen which ones I was allowed to know. You said you saw Rebecca before. Her shoulders lowered. Yes. How many times? Luke, I'm not asking what you think it meant. A breeze pushed sanding dust along the boards. I'm asking what you saw. She held my gaze. More than once. The answer irritated me because it was careful. Rebecca used careful answers. Hannah seemed to read the comparison on my face. I know how that sounds. Then stop making me pull every sentence out of you. Marcus had moved to the far side of the house. Hannah stepped back. You're right. No defense. No explanation. It disarmed me more effectively than an argument. I saw her car twice, she said. And once I saw her walking back toward it from your side yard. Did you see her enter the house? Hannah paused. No. The pause mattered. I stored it away. Why didn't you tell me? I'm going to answer that. When? When I can answer it without giving you the clean version. I did not like the sentence. I believed it. That was worse. She turned toward the steps, then stopped. You keep saying you're fine when what you mean is you can handle it alone. My jaw tightened. Those aren't the same thing. I know. She walked back to her truck. That evening, I repaired the runner after Marcus went home. The old wood had worn unevenly, so I shaved the replacement until the drawer moved without catching. Measure, test, adjust, do not force. My phone sat on the workbench beside me. I opened Rebecca's contact and typed, I don't want trouble. I just need the folder back. I read the sentence twice. Calm, adult, reasonable. It also sounded exactly like the man Rebecca had always needed me to be. Someone willing to apologize for the existence of a boundary before he even stated it. My thumb rested over send. Then I deleted the message. Not because I had become brave in a single day. I had not. I deleted it because I finally recognized the reflex. I was still trying to make Rebecca easier to forgive before she had said a word. For once, I decided to leave the explanation where it belonged. With Rebecca. Tuesday morning, the locksmith found the first thing I could not explain away. His name was Earl Benton, a narrow man with silver hair and the patient expression of someone who had spent 30 years opening doors for people. He examined the old hardware I had removed and left on the kitchen counter. You changed this yesterday? First thing. He turned the cylinder beneath the window light. What happened to the key that did this? What do you mean? This lock was being worked by something worn differently from your key. I handed him mine. He slid it into the cylinder, withdrew it, then pointed to a faint bright line along one side of the keyway. Your key ride's clean. Whatever else went in here was cut close enough to work, but not from the same blank. Hannah was standing near the sink because she had come over to pick up the drawer I had repaired. Rebecca had another key. Not a possibility. A copy. Earl set the lock down. If you want certainty, keep the hardware. Don't throw it away. After he left, Hannah picked up the old cylinder without touching the keyway. You should put this somewhere safe. You mean somewhere Rebecca doesn't have a key to? The sentence came out sharper than I intended. Hannah placed the lock back on the counter. I deserved that. The old Luke would have apologized. I let the sentence remain. I carried the lock into my office and set it beside my father's file box. The steel lid was still open from Saturday. I had checked the papers inside twice already, but mostly to confirm the blue folder was gone. This time I emptied everything onto the desk. Deed, insurance policies, old tax receipts, business registration, my father's death certificate. At the bottom lay a thin stack of papers fastened with a rusting brass clip. Beneath them was a duplicate closing statement from the divorce and an old transfer authorization with Rebecca's signature. My stomach tightened. I knew the page. Rebecca had handled most of the business account then. She told me the transfer was temporary. The money came back. I never asked where it had sat in between. Hannah appeared in the doorway. "You found something." I held up the photocopy. Rebecca moved business money into another account before the divorce. "Did it come back?" "Yes." "Then why does this matter now?" "Because the account number on this page is the same one she swore never existed." Hannah's face changed. Not surprise. Recognition. "You've seen that number." She pressed her lips together. "Not the whole number. Hannah, I saw the last 4 digits once." "Where?" She rubbed a thumb across the edge of the drawer she was still carrying. "On an envelope Rebecca dropped near your side gate." "When?" "Last month." "You picked it up?" "I did." "And?" "I gave it back to her." I stood. The chair rolled into the wall behind me. "You gave it back." She was still outside. "I thought it was mail." "But you saw the number. It was printed through the window." I walked into the kitchen because I needed movement more than another careful answer. Hannah followed, but kept several feet between us. "Luke, I know how this sounds." "No. You know how it looks. I'm still trying to figure out how much you knew." "That's fair. Stop agreeing with me like that makes it easier." "It doesn't." "Then tell me something before I have to drag it out of you." Her eyes dropped to the counter. "I thought Rebecca was trying to see if you had moved on." "What?" "The car, the side gate, the times I saw her around here. I thought she was watching you because of me." "So you stayed quiet because you thought this was about jealousy?" "Partly. I remembered her saying she would answer when she could do it without giving me the clean version. This was not complete." "What's the other part?" Hannah looked toward the back door. "Not today." My hand tightened around the coffee mug. "You don't get to decide when I'm ready for the truth." "No." "Then why are you?" "Because if I tell you the rest now, you'll hear it as an explanation. I need to tell it when I'm ready to call it what it was." "You mean a mistake?" "I mean a choice." That stopped me. Hannah set the repaired drawer on the counter. "I made one." Before I could ask, my phone rang. "Marcus." I answered. "Tell me Thursday is still Thursday." "It is," he said. "But there's a problem." "What kind?" Elaine called. "Someone sent the preservation board questions about our ownership records." The coffee went cold in my hand. "What questions?" "Whether Rebecca still has a financial claim on Mercer Restoration." Marcus kept talking. "They want copies of the old business filings before the review." My eyes went back to the office, to the open file box, to the missing blue folder, to the transfer authorization Rebecca had insisted did not matter. What exactly did they receive? "I don't know," Elaine wouldn't say. "Rebecca had not gone into my house looking for something random. She had gone looking for something connected to the business. And now the board was asking questions only a handful of people knew enough to ask. Marcus said my name. "I'm here. You want me to come over?" The familiar answer rose first. "I'm fine." I stopped it. "Yes," I said. "Bring every ownership record you have at the shop." There was a pause. Then Marcus said, "On my way." I hung up. Hannah reached for the old lock, then stopped before touching it. "What are you going to do?" I picked up the transfer authorization. "Find out what she took." "And Rebecca." My phone felt heavy in my pocket. I did not want to call her. I wanted documents, dates, something that would still be true after everyone stopped talking. I slipped the photocopy into a clean envelope, wrote the date across the front, and placed it beside the old lock cylinder. Then I closed my father's file box. The lid clicked shut, louder than such a small piece of metal had any right to sound. 3 years earlier, I had signed divorce papers because I believed ending the argument was the same thing as ending the problem. Now the problem had walked back through my locked door. And somewhere between my missing folder and the questions waiting at the preservation board, Rebecca had started writing a version of my business that could cost more than my reputation. It could cost the people who worked for me their winter. Elaine Brooks chose the upstairs meeting room at the preservation office because, as she put it, Thursday's review is supposed to be boring. By the time I arrived, boring was already gone. Marcus sat near the window with a folder of ownership records on his lap. Elaine stood at the end of the long table beside two committee members I knew from previous projects, Gerald Price and Nina Cole. A homeowner named Mrs. Avery had been invited because her house was part of the proposed restoration block. Hannah was there too. I had not asked her to come. She gave me a small nod from the wall and did not move closer. Then Rebecca walked in. She wore a gray coat, carried no visible papers, and greeted Elaine like someone arriving for an appointment she had every right to attend. My first thought was that I should leave, not because I was afraid of Rebecca, because I knew exactly what would happen if I stayed. She would say something polished. I would decide answering would make me look defensive. Then everyone else would carry home the version that had actually been spoken. Elaine closed the door. Luke, before we begin the contract review, something was sent to the board this morning. By Rebecca? Elaine did not answer directly. Rebecca did. I asked for clarification. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. I kept my hands flat on the table. Clarification about what? Whether the ownership history of Mercer Restoration was represented accurately. Marcus shifted in his chair. That's nonsense. Elaine raised a hand. Marcus. Rebecca did not even turn toward him. She watched me. That is one issue. One? Elaine glanced at the committee members. There is another. Rebecca finally opened her handbag and removed a photograph. She placed it in the center of the table. I recognized the string lights first, then Hannah's hand around my arm, then myself, unsteady, leaning toward her as she walked me away from the party. A second photograph showed us crossing into Hannah's house. Both had been taken at the neighborhood party and forwarded to Rebecca before breakfast. Nobody spoke. My face warmed. Rebecca said, I did not come here to discuss Luke's private life. Hannah made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Rebecca continued, but when someone is being considered for unsupervised access to occupied historic properties, judgment matters. There it was. Not cheating, not drinking. Judgment. Elaine's mouth tightened. Rebecca, be precise. Rebecca folded her hands. I am trying to be. She turned toward Mrs. Avery. Luke has keys to clients' homes. Alarm codes. Access when families are away. I think the board deserves to know whether recent behavior raises concerns. What recent behavior? I asked. Her eyes came back to me. You were intoxicated enough that a neighbor had to take you into her house. One night. I know. She said it with sympathy. The sympathy made it worse. And I hope it was only one. Marcus pushed his chair back. You don't get to walk in here and turn one bad night into... Elaine stopped him again. Let Luke answer. That should have helped. Instead, every old instinct returned at once. Keep it small. Do not embarrass anyone. Do not make a scene. I could feel the sentence forming. Rebecca and I have history. This is a misunderstanding. I'm sorry it reached the board. Hannah stepped away from the wall. Luke, only my name. Rebecca noticed. A faint smile touched one corner of her mouth. There is also the question of Miss Bell. Hannah stopped. Rebecca looked at Elaine. I am not accusing anyone of an affair. The careful wording made my stomach turn. I am saying there has been an unusual degree of involvement between Luke and his neighbor for some time, and that this involvement now overlaps with a business dispute between Luke and me. Hannah spoke before I could stop her. That is not what happened. Rebecca faced her. I didn't say what happened. No. You just made sure everyone else would. The air tightened. Gerald shifted his pen. Nina stared at the photographs. Rebecca's expression remained soft. Hannah, I understand why you want to protect him. That was the trap. If Hannah defended me, Rebecca would call it loyalty. If Hannah stayed quiet, Rebecca's suggestion would remain in the air. Hannah saw it too. Her jaw set. I shook my head once. Do not. She hated it. I could tell. But she stepped back. Rebecca turned to the table again. My concern is stability. I am not calling Luke unstable, but the board cannot ignore a pattern. Unstable. One word. Clean. Professional. Dangerous. Luke is under financial pressure. He has unresolved ownership questions. There are now concerns about alcohol and personal boundaries. I think proceeding without review would be irresponsible. Unstable, Mrs. Avery said quietly. Rebecca did not correct her. The word spread that way. Not through an accusation anyone could easily challenge. Through repetition, I felt something hot rise behind my ribs. For years I had believed anger was evidence that I was losing. Rebecca had counted on that. I stood, every face turned toward me. The old Luke wanted to explain the marriage, the party, Hannah, the missing folder, everything at once. Instead, I put one hand on the photograph. This picture is real. Rebecca's eyes narrowed slightly. I drank too much. Hannah took my keys and made sure I did not drive. No excuses, no apology. That has nothing to do with the ownership of my company. Rebecca opened her mouth. I kept speaking. And Hannah is not evidence. That landed harder than I expected. She is a person. If you have a claim against me, make it against me. Rebecca answered too quickly. I already have. A small crack. Elaine noticed. So did Hannah. I slid the photograph back toward Rebecca. Then, leave her out of it. For a moment, Rebecca's smile arrived late. Elaine gathered the ownership documents Marcus had brought. The board will review the records before making a final contract decision. How long? Marcus asked. I can't promise. He swore under his breath. Elaine continued. Until then, no new access credentials will be issued for the block. That meant no start date, no deposits, no winter schedule. Rebecca picked up the photographs. I'm sorry it came to this. I did not answer. In the hallway, Hannah caught up with me. You shouldn't have stopped me. Yes, I should have. I could have told them what happened, and she would have made you the reason I was saying any of it. Hannah stared at me. She already did. Then don't help her. Her face changed. Not anger exactly. Hurt. You think me speaking is helping her. I think Rebecca knows exactly what people do when they feel accused, and you know exactly what you do. I stopped walking. Hannah lowered her voice. You disappear inside yourself. Before I could answer, Mrs. Avery came through the meeting room door behind us. She held a small brass ring in her palm. 3 house keys. My temporary access set for her property. She had given them to me the week before. Luke, her voice was apologetic. I know the board hasn't decided anything. She extended the keys. But until they do, I think I'd feel better keeping these. I stared at the ring. The keys were not evidence. They were not proof Rebecca was right. They were simply the first thing her story had taken from my hand in public. I accepted them. Mrs. Avery thanked me for understanding. Of course she did. Understanding was what people asked from the person who had just lost something. The keys pressed cold against my palm. Behind me, Hannah said nothing. For once, neither did I. Hannah's workshop smelled like cedar dust, old varnish, and the tomato soup she had reheated badly enough to leave a red ring around the pot. I stood near the back bench with Mrs. Avery's keys still in my coat pocket. Hannah set a bowl in front of me. Eat. I'm not hungry. That wasn't a question. Under any other circumstances, I might have smiled. I sat. The workshop was narrow enough that every sound had edges. A clamp settling against wood, rain tapping the back window, the small refrigerator humming beside a stack of chair legs waiting for stain. Hannah took the stool across from me. She did not ask how I felt about the meeting. She knew. I ate 3 spoonfuls before saying, Rebecca used to do that. Feed you? Answer for me. Hannah stayed still. At restaurants. At the bank. With clients. She would start with something harmless. Tell them what I wanted before I said it. Explain why I was late. Explain why I turned down a job. Then eventually she was explaining what I thought. The spoon rested in my hand. I let her. That doesn't make what she did right. No, but it made it easy. Hannah folded a shop rag once. Then again, I used to think staying calm meant I was the reasonable one. Rebecca could say whatever she wanted, and if I didn't react, I told myself I had kept my dignity. And now I think I just made the room easier for her. Hannah's eyes dropped to the workbench. I noticed a splinter under the edge of my thumb, probably from the meeting table or the porch job. I tried to pull it free with a fingernail. Give me your hand, she said. It's nothing. Luke. I held it out. She took a pair of fine tweezers from a drawer and bent over my thumb. Her fingers were warm around my hand, steady in the way they always were, around damaged wood. The splinter came out clean. She wiped the spot with alcohol. I pulled my hand back before the contact could become something else. Your turn. Hannah closed the drawer. For what? The truth. Her shoulders tightened. Outside, a truck passed on the wet street. You said you made a choice. I did. What was it? She stood and carried my empty bowl to the sink, although I had not finished eating. I saw Rebecca use a key. The words were quiet enough that the refrigerator seemed loud. When? About 2 months ago. The date landed immediately. I remembered that week. A receipt had disappeared from my desk. A cabinet drawer had been left open. I had spent an hour accusing myself of becoming careless. Where were you? On my porch. You watched her go in? Yes. And come out? Yes. What was she carrying? Nothing I could see. I stood. Hannah kept both hands on the edge of the sink. The next morning, I asked you if anyone had been around my house. I remember. You said no. Yes. One word, no excuse attached. I waited anyway. She turned around. Rebecca came over before you got home that night. I asked why she had a key. What did she say? That she was picking up tax papers she had left behind. She said you knew, and you believed her. I wanted to. Why? Hannah's mouth tightened. Because I had already started wanting things I had no right to want. I said nothing. She knew I cared about you. How? I think she guessed. Maybe I made it obvious. And that made you lie? No. Hannah pushed away from the sink. That made me afraid of what telling you would look like. Her voice lost some of its steadiness. I thought if I came to you and said your ex-wife was entering your house, you would hear jealousy before you heard concern. That still doesn't explain the lie. I know. She took a breath. The rest is worse. I waited. Part of me wanted to believe Rebecca was doing something wrong. The sentence surprised me. Hannah went on before I could answer. I hated that she could walk back into your life whenever she wanted. I hated how quickly you made room for explanations she hadn't earned. And when I saw her with that key, some ugly part of me thought maybe this would finally be the thing that made you stop defending her. My jaw tightened. So you kept quiet and waited for me to catch her? Yes. You let me keep living in a house you knew she could enter. Yes. You let me think I had misplaced things. Her face changed. I didn't know things were missing, but you knew enough. Yes. I walked to the back window. Rain streaked the glass over Hannah's reflection. Months of coffee on the porch rail. The shop light left on when I walked Biscuit. The drawer runner carried to my job site. All those small kindnesses were still real. So was this. You didn't stay out of it, I said. No. You helped her keep me out of it. Hannah flinched. Yes. That was the first answer she had given me that felt complete. Not because it made her innocent, because it did not. She came closer, but stopped well before touching me. I am sorry. I kept my eyes on the rain. I don't know what to do with that yet. You don't have to do anything. Please don't make this easier for me either. She nodded. Okay. A long minute passed. Then Hannah reached for the coat hanging beside the door and held it out. You left this here after the party. I took it. Our fingers brushed. Neither of us moved at first. The anger was still there. So was something else that had been there long before the anger. Hannah's eyes lifted to mine. She was close enough that I could smell sawdust and soap. My hand tightened around the coat. For one dangerous second, stepping toward her felt simpler than everything waiting outside that workshop. She must have felt it too. Her breathing changed. I stepped back. Not like this. Hannah closed her eyes for a moment. I know. If anything ever happens between us, it can't start because Rebecca broke something. It won't. And it can't start because you feel guilty. Her face tightened. It won't. I need to know I can trust you before I know what this is. She nodded. That's fair. No. I put on the coat. That's necessary. I reached the back door before she spoke again. Luke. I turned. I'll give you everything I remember. Every time I saw her. Every date I can place. No clean version. I held the door open. Write it down. Hannah nodded. I stepped into the rain. Behind me, the workshop door stayed open until I crossed the alley. I did not feel better. I did not feel closer to Hannah. But for the first time since Rebecca walked into my house, I knew exactly where one truth stood. It hurt. And nobody in that workshop was asking me to call the hurt something else. Priya Shah read the preservation board notice twice before setting it beside the old lock cylinder on my desk. She had represented me during the divorce, although Rebecca had always called her the expensive way to avoid a conversation. Priya had never found that funny. What does the board actually have? She asked. Questions about ownership, photographs from the party, maybe copies of old account records. Maybe? I don't know what Rebecca sent. Marcus stood near the filing cabinet with his arms crossed. How bad is this? Priya tapped the notice. The contract is frozen, not canceled. To them, Marcus said. Payroll doesn't care about vocabulary. He was right. The restoration block had been scheduled to carry us through the slow season. Without the deposit, we had enough cash for regular payroll for a little over a month. Priya asked for every business account, ownership record, and divorce document that touched Mercer Restoration. When I told her the blue folder was missing, she closed her eyes for a second. You should have called me Saturday. I wanted to know what I was dealing with first. You knew enough to know someone entered your home. I didn't want to turn it into a legal fight before I knew what it was. Priya leaned forward. That instinct is why people like Rebecca get to define the first version. I heard Hannah's warning underneath Priya's words. Do not contact Rebecca directly, Priya said. If she reaches out, send it to me. That sounds like surrendering the conversation. It is controlling the record. I disliked how similar those things felt. By noon, Marcus and I were at the shop, with the schedule spread across the workbench. 3 porch jobs could continue. Everything tied to the historic block was stopped. Marcus ran a pencil down the crew list. We cut Fridays. No. Then we run short before the end of the month. We'll pick up smaller work. With what time? He slid the pencil toward me. You always tell me rot is cheaper when you cut it out early. People aren't rot. No, they're people with rent. That ended the argument. We reduced hours. Not layoffs. Not yet. I gathered the crew near the loading bay and told them the city contract had been delayed because of a dispute involving old ownership records. Cal, our youngest carpenter, nodded and stared at the floor. Derek asked how long the reduced schedule would last. I don't know. The answer tasted worse than any lie I could have given them. After they left, Marcus stayed. You did that better than you used to. What? You told them you didn't know. I started stacking clamps that were already stacked. He took one from my hand. You used to give people comfort even when you had to invent it. My phone buzzed. A message from Hannah. I wrote everything down. Dates. What I saw. What I said to Rebecca. I can bring it over if you want. Not tonight, I typed. Then I added, send it to Priya, not me. Her reply came a moment later. Okay. No question mark. No attempt to make me reassure her. It should have made things easier. Instead, I missed her. By evening, the bank had called. The line of credit Mercer Restoration used for materials was up for review, and the delayed city contract changed the numbers they expected to see. The woman on the phone asked whether there was a pending ownership dispute. I told her there was a claim being reviewed. She said the bank might reduce the available line until the matter was clarified. After the call, I drove home and parked under the porch light. My new key stuck slightly in the new deadbolt. Inside, every room felt familiar and violated at the same time. I checked the office, then the back door, then the windows, then the office again. I stopped with my hand on the file box. A knock came from the front porch. Hannah stood outside holding a paper grocery bag. I know what you said. Then why are you here? Because I'm not asking to come in. She lifted the bag. Soup, bread, coffee. I have food. You have mustard, eggs, and something in a container that I'm pretty sure used to be chili. Despite myself, I laughed once. She set the bag on the porch rail. I wanted to say something without making you answer. I waited. If being here makes any of this harder, I'll stay away. The porch light caught sawdust in her hair. But I'm not going to disappear because Rebecca wants my presence to look guilty. That's not why I asked you to send the statement to Priya. I know. I need a line between what helps the case and whatever this is. Her eyes held mine. So do I. The easy thing would have been to invite her inside. The house felt wrong. Hannah felt familiar. That combination was exactly why I did not. You should go home. Pain crossed her face, small and honest. Then she nodded. Okay. She turned toward the steps. Hannah. She stopped. Thank you for the food. You're welcome. She went next door. I carried the bag inside and left it on the counter. Later, Priya called again. The board's attorney wants a temporary disclosure agreement before they release whatever was submitted against you. What does that mean? You agree not to publicly accuse Rebecca of theft while the review is active. She entered my house. I know. She took something. We believe she took something. The correction irritated me because it was legally correct. Truth and proof are not always on the same timetable, Priya said. I sat at the kitchen table. Mrs. Avery's returned keys were still in my coat pocket. What happens if I refuse? They may delay disclosure. And if I sign? You get information sooner, but you give up part of your freedom to speak while we sort it out. 3 years earlier, I would have signed anything that promised quiet. That night, quiet looked expensive. I want to read every word first. Priya paused. Then she said, Good. After we hung up, I opened Hannah's bag. Soup, bread, coffee. Nothing that asked me to forgive her. Nothing that asked to be invited inside. I heated the soup and ate alone at the counter. Across the yard, Hannah's workshop light came on. I did not go over. She did not come back. Distance did not feel like abandonment. It felt like a boundary both of us had chosen to respect. The next morning, Marcus sent the revised payroll schedule. The numbers were smaller. The cost was no longer abstract. It had names beside it, people who had trusted me to keep work coming. I printed the schedule and set it beside the old lock cylinder. One object showed me who had entered my house without permission. The other showed me what telling the truth might cost. I kept both. The settlement offer arrived Friday morning, in a white envelope with Rebecca's attorney's name across the top. Priya opened it at my kitchen table, while Marcus stood by the window. She'll withdraw the ownership challenge, Priya said. Marcus exhaled. Good, Priya kept reading. That is not the whole offer. Rebecca wanted a payment described as a final business distribution. She wanted both sides to stop discussing the house entry publicly. She wanted a joint statement saying the preservation dispute had resulted from incomplete records and personal misunderstandings. No admission that she had entered my home. No mention of the missing folder. No accusation from either side. Just peace. I read the first page again. How fast would this clear the contract? If the board accepts the statement, quickly. How quickly? Possibly within days. Days meant payroll. Days meant the material account stayed open. Days meant men who had already lost Friday hours could stop wondering whether Monday would disappear next. The offer sat beneath my hand. Easy. Familiar. I could pay for quiet and call it maturity. Priya seemed to know where my mind had gone. Do not decide because you are scared for the crew. They're my responsibility. Yes. And Rebecca knows that. Marcus rubbed both hands over his face. Luke, there's something I need to tell you. I waited. Rebecca called me a few months ago. When? Back in spring. Why? She said her accountant needed old estimates from when she still helped with the books. She said it was for tax records. I did not speak. I sent her a spreadsheet. What spreadsheet? The old bid history. Job values. Deposits. Some ownership notes from the early years. My chair scraped the floor. You gave her company records? I thought she already had them. She has been divorced from me for 3 years. I know. Did you ask me? No. Why not? His answer took too long. Because she said you would make it complicated. Something in my chest went cold. That did not sound like Marcus. It sounded like a version of me Rebecca had handed him. I'm sorry, Priya asked. Did she request anything else? She asked whether the city block bid was going well. Whether Luke had taken on debt for it. And you answered. Some of it. Why? Because she used to handle that stuff. Because it didn't feel important. He met my eyes. And because when she said you hated paperwork, I believed her. That hurt more than the spreadsheet. Not because it was entirely false. I did hate paperwork. Rebecca had taken one true thing and built a door around it. Gerald Price's name lit the screen. Thought you should know this is getting around. People are saying Rebecca carried the company for years, and you cut her out after the divorce. Several homeowners are concerned. A second message followed. You may want to settle before this damages more than the city job. Marcus swore. Who told him that? I stared at the screen. The story was moving faster than facts because it offered people something simple. Rebecca had been the competent wife. I had been the quiet craftsman who needed managing. Then I had removed her and benefited from the work she helped build. It was cleaner than the truth. Clean stories traveled well. Priya tapped the settlement. This is why she wants the joint statement now. She wants the board to hear the quiet version before I find out what she took. That is my concern. Marcus picked up his phone. I can fix part of this. How? I'll call Rebecca. Tell her I sent the spreadsheet. No. He stared at me. She used me. And you gave her something without asking me. Own that part. His face tightened. That's what I'm trying to do. Then do it without giving her another conversation to shape. Marcus put the phone down. A moment later, it rang. Rebecca. Her name appeared across the screen. None of us moved. It stopped. Then, a message arrived. Marcus read it silently. His expression changed. What? He turned the phone toward Priya. Tell Luke the revised numbers were never supposed to be in his file. Priya went still. Marcus said, What revised numbers? I took the phone. Rebecca had answered a question nobody had asked. Priya held out her hand. Do not respond. I gave her the phone. She thinks I found something. Yes. Something in the folder? Maybe. Priya photographed the message and told Marcus to preserve the thread. The settlement no longer looked like peace. It looked hurried. That did not mean I could afford to reject it. By afternoon, a crew member called to ask whether he should start looking for temporary work. Then Mrs. Avery contacted Marcus, instead of me, about a repair she wanted postponed. By dinner, Rebecca's story had begun changing ordinary behavior around me. People did not accuse me. They became careful. Careful with keys. Careful with money. Careful about being seen on my side. I sat alone at the kitchen table with the settlement in front of me. Priya had marked the signature line with a yellow tab. If I signed, the business might breathe again. The crew might get their hours back. Rebecca would get money and silence. I uncapped a pen. The sentence Hannah had given me came back. Make her explanation before she has to. This time, I was about to do something worse. I was about to sign her explanation for her. My phone showed a draft message to Priya. I accept. 2 words. No fight. No more neighbors returning keys. No more guessing whether the bank would call. My thumb rested above send. Then the porch light came on next door. Hannah's workshop stayed dark. She was home, keeping the distance I had asked for. She was not coming to save me from the decision. Nobody was. I deleted the message. Then I turned the settlement over and wrote across the blank back page. I will pay what I actually owe. I will not pay for a version of me that is not true. The next morning, Priya called. You're sure? No. Good. What happens now? We make them prove the claim. And the contract? May stay frozen. The crew? You may lose people. Truth did not feel noble. It felt expensive. Priya paused. There's one more thing. What? Rebecca's attorney just asked whether we have the original transfer schedule. I sat upright. We never told them we found a transfer authorization. I know. There it was. Not proof. Not yet, but a crack. Someone on Rebecca's side was afraid of a document they had no reason to know we were looking for. And the pressure around me was no longer asking whether I could stay calm. It was asking whether I could stay truthful after calm stopped being useful. Priya told me not to think of the hearing as a trial. That will only make you perform, she said. The preservation board had reserved the same upstairs meeting room where Rebecca had shown the photographs. This time the table held binders instead of coffee cups. Elaine sat at the end with Gerald and Nina. Mrs. Avery had come because her property was still part of the frozen block. Marcus sat behind me. Hannah chose a seat against the far wall. She had sent Priya her written statement exactly as promised. Every date she remembered. Every time she saw Rebecca near my house. And the sentence where she admitted she had once seen Rebecca use a key and then lied to me about it. Priya had asked whether Hannah wanted that part removed from the board copy. Hannah said no. Rebecca arrived with her attorney and a leather folder pressed against her side. She looked at me and smiled the way people smile when they want a room to believe nothing personal is happening. Elaine began with the ownership question. Priya submitted the business filings, tax records, and divorce settlement. None showed Rebecca holding any current ownership in Mercer Restoration. Rebecca's attorney argued that the settlement had relied on incomplete financial disclosure. Then he produced copies of the old bid histories Marcus had sent. Rebecca's notes appeared in the margins of some pages. That part was true. She had helped. She built systems I still use, I told the board. She helped me stop underpricing work. I'm not going to erase that, because we are fighting now. Rebecca's expression shifted slightly. Her attorney asked, Then you agree she contributed to the value of the company? I agree she contributed, and you later excluded her. After the divorce, according to the agreement we both signed, he started to respond. I kept my voice level. Her contribution is not the question. Whether she entered my home after the divorce and removed records is. Rebecca spoke. You keep using the word removed. Priya turned toward her. Miss Sloan, your attorney asked that you not testify informally. I'm correcting language, Elaine said. Then let him finish. The board moved to the photographs from the party. Her attorney described them as evidence of impaired judgment and an undisclosed personal relationship connected to the dispute. The old reflex waited. Explain Hannah. Explain the divorce. Explain why I had drunk too much. I did something simpler. I drank too much that night. That was irresponsible. Hannah took my keys. I did not drive. I slept in her guest room. Nothing happened between us. Rebecca's attorney asked. You expect the board to accept that because Miss Bell says so? No. I expect you to accept that the photograph proves exactly what the photograph shows. Nothing more. Gerald stopped writing. Hannah is not evidence of an affair. She is also not my alibi. She made a mistake in this situation too, and her statement says what it was. Hannah did not move. Rebecca did. A small turn of her head. If you want to question my judgment at the party, do it. If you want to question my business records, do it. But you do not get to combine unrelated facts until they become a personality. Rebecca's smile disappeared. Her attorney asked Elaine for a break. Rebecca said, No, too fast. He glanced at her. Priya opened a thin binder. The locksmith's written assessment came first. A second key, cut from a different blank, had repeatedly worked the old backdoor cylinder. Then Hannah's statement established that Rebecca had previously been seen using a key. Marcus's statement established that he had sent Rebecca old company data because she said it was needed for tax purposes. Finally, Priya placed a photocopy of the transfer authorization on the table. Rebecca stared at it. Her attorney said, We have never seen that document. Priya answered, I did not say you had. Rebecca spoke before he could stop her. That copy doesn't have the blue tab. Nobody moved. Elaine frowned. What blue tab? Rebecca's attorney turned toward her. Rebecca's mouth opened, then closed. The polished answer did not arrive. I asked, How do you know the original had one? Rebecca looked at her attorney, not at me. He said, Do not answer. The damage had already happened. The blue folder had contained the transfer schedule behind a pale blue divider tab my father had added years earlier. I had never mentioned the tab to the board. Priya had not mentioned it in correspondence. Marcus had never seen the folder. Rebecca knew. Elaine asked, Miss Sloan, how would you know that? Rebecca's hands tightened around the leather folder. I helped organize his files for years. Before the divorce, Priya said. Rebecca's eyes flashed. He never changes anything. There it was, not a confession. Certainty that my house, my habits, my files, and even my silence still belonged to a version of me she understood better than I did. I said, That is the problem. Rebecca faced me. What is? You still think knowing how I used to live gives you permission to decide what I mean now. Her voice sharpened. I am trying to stop you from rewriting our marriage like I did nothing for you. I already said what you did for me. You would still be fixing porch steps for cash if I had not built that company with you. You may be right about where I would have been, Rebecca blinked. But helping build something does not mean you own every version of it forever. Her attorney whispered her name. She kept going. You let me handle everything because you couldn't. No, I let you handle things because I trusted you. You needed me, sometimes. The word landed harder than denial. Rebecca stared at me. You always do this. You stand there quietly until everyone thinks you're the reasonable one. I nodded. I did. I used silence to avoid conflict. I let people speak for me because correcting them felt rude. I let you do it longer than I should have. Elaine watched without interrupting. Being quiet made me easy to describe. It never made your description true. Rebecca's face reddened. She pointed toward Hannah. And what about her? You expect everyone to believe she just happened to be watching my car, watching your house, leaving coffee on your porch. No. My voice cut across hers. You don't get to change the subject just because the truth finally has witnesses. Hannah stayed seated. I was grateful. I did not need her to stand beside me. I needed what she had already done. tell the truth, even where it made her look worse. Priya reminded Elaine that the missing folder would be handled separately. This hearing was not about punishing Rebecca. It was about whether the board could trust my records and my conduct. So I stopped talking about Rebecca. I explained the company, the ownership, the current accounts, the payroll cuts. I answered every question I could and said, I don't know, when I could not. When it ended, Elaine gathered the papers. The board will issue its decision after council reviews today's record. Rebecca stood. For a second, she seemed smaller than the woman who had entered. Not defeated, just unable to control the room anymore. At the door, she turned toward me. You really think this makes you different? No. Then I said, answering for myself does. She left. Hannah remained against the wall until Priya finished speaking with Elaine. She did not come to me. I did not go to her. On the table lay the old brass lock cylinder and its evidence bag. Weeks earlier, it had felt like proof that someone else still had access to my life. Now it looked smaller. The lock had never been the whole problem. The problem was how long I had believed keeping a door closed was the same thing as deciding who was allowed through it. The board approved Mercer restoration to return to the historic block 6 weeks later. Not everything came back with it. 2 homeowners hired someone else before the decision. Cal took a temporary roofing job and stayed there because they could promise steady hours through winter. The bank restored most of our credit line, but not all of it. Nobody handed me the life I had before Rebecca walked through my back door. That turned out to be useful. The old life had contained too many places where I confused peace with permission. Elaine called personally to tell me the contract could move forward. Then she added, Mrs. Avery asked whether you would still take her porch job. I did not answer immediately. A month earlier, I would have heard the request as proof that everything had been repaired. It wasn't. Mrs. Avery had been afraid. Rebecca's story had given that fear somewhere to land. I'll call her, I said. When I did, Mrs. Avery apologized once. I should have asked you before I decided what I believed. I told her I appreciated that. I did not tell her it no longer hurt. Marcus returned to full hours before the rest of the crew. He never asked me to forget the spreadsheet. He simply stopped assuming access was the same thing as permission. When someone wanted records, he sent them to me. We were quieter with each other for a while. Then, slowly, we became ordinary again. Rebecca's attorney negotiated the remaining financial claim with Priya. There was money I owed, not what Rebecca had demanded, but enough that writing the check made my jaw tighten. Priya asked whether I wanted a statement saying Rebecca had acted improperly. No. You're sure? I want the agreement to say what the numbers are. Nothing about who won. Rebecca never apologized for entering the house. She never admitted taking the folder. The legal language called it disputed possession of records. I hated the phrase. I signed anyway because this time the agreement did not require me to call the truth something else. The blue folder came back through the attorneys. The papers inside smelled faintly of perfume that did not belong in my office. I put the transfer schedule back in my father's file box. The pale blue divider tab was still attached. I kept the old lock cylinder too. Some nights, I still checked the back door twice. A car parked too long across the street could pull my attention away from dinner. Once, Marcus came up behind me at the shop, and I turned so sharply I knocked a level off the bench. He caught it before it hit the floor. Neither of us joked. Hannah gave me what I had asked for. Distance. She stopped leaving coffee on my porch. For several weeks, our conversations happened at the property line, or over work that genuinely belonged to both of us. She did not ask whether I forgave her. Then one Saturday morning, I found her sanding a walnut table beneath the light in her workshop. The door was open. I stood outside. She noticed me and turned off the sander. Work question. No. I stepped inside. I'm still angry about what you did. I know. I don't think I'll ever be able to make that part disappear. I'm not asking you to. I ran my thumb along the table edge. You told the truth when it made you look bad. Eventually. Yes. She did not accept more credit than she had earned. I don't want to start something because you helped me through this. Neither do I. And I don't want to pretend nothing was there before it. A small smile appeared. That would also be a lie. Coffee? She asked. Black. I remember. I know. We drank it on her porch. Nothing happened that morning except coffee. That was the point. A few weeks later, we had dinner. Then another. We kept our own houses. The first time she kissed me, she stopped afterward and asked, "Still okay?" It embarrassed me how much the question mattered. Yes, I said. Then, because I had spent too many years assuming people should know what I meant, I added, stay. Spring arrived slowly. At the first neighborhood barbecue, someone behind me laughed hard enough to slap the table. My shoulders locked before I could stop them. For a second, I was back at the preservation office with photographs between strangers and Rebecca turning one bad night into a definition of my character. Hannah noticed. She did not ask if I was okay. She set a cup of black coffee beside my hand and continued listening to Marcus tell a terrible story about a porch swing. A minute later, my shoulders came down on their own. That was what healing looked like more often than I expected. Not forgetting, not being rescued, having enough room to return to yourself. Early that summer, I had to leave town for a restoration job. The night before, I stood in my kitchen with a new brass key in my palm. Hannah was rinsing 2 coffee mugs at the sink. I held the key out. Would you keep the spare while I'm gone? She dried her hands before taking it. If you're asking, the old key from the replaced lock was still in the drawer behind me. So was the lock cylinder Rebecca had used. I'm asking. Hannah took the new key. She did not put it on her ring. She set it carefully beside her phone. Something in my chest tightened. Not fear, exactly. Memory. She saw it, and left the key where it was. No reassurance. No promise that nobody would ever hurt me again. Just patience. The next morning, 2 mugs sat on the porch rail. Mine was black. Hers had too much cream. Between them was empty space. Not distance. Room. Some people do not damage your life by shouting. They do it by repeating a version of you until everyone else finds it easier to believe than the truth. And sometimes the person who helps you most is not the one who fixes the damage. It is the one willing to tell the truth, even when that truth makes them look worse, too. If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments whether you have ever had to stop letting someone else explain who you were. And if you want more stories about people finding their way back to their own voice, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.